Been finding out things about mounting motors lately and realising if you get it wrong you wind up with short flight time, overheated motors and overheated, in some cases, destroyed batteries. So it's important to get it right. So this is looking at the way Bugs 3 motors are mounted. They're mounted on these little metal plates, and there's a bit of a gap in the well that they sit in on the original Bugs 3 arm, and they're fine. So when I bought these slightly larger motors, mounted it on the frame of a DJI F450, I noticed it's running reasonably cool and not having any problems. And I think, looking back, the reason was because if you look underneath it, there's actually a bit of a gap, holes in the frame to allow cool air to be sucked up through the motors. I had originally thought that the holes in the side would be enough to help. I've got these motors mounted on aluminium, on fiberglass plates. It also helps get a bit of air through them. So with the success of these motors in mind, I finally got around to doing what I'd always intended to do, which was to mount larger motors on a Bugs 3 to see how they go. And this has been the result. In fact, it hasn't been terribly successful. These motors are overheating, and as I say, I haven't pushed it so hard that the batteries failed, but the batteries overheat, the motors overheat, and the flight time's reduced. So I thought originally that the slots in the motor would be enough to suck more air through, but given that it's enclosed underneath, that's clearly not the case. So, having a rethink, I've come up with something else. These motors I've moved around a few times. Originally I had them on a Bugs 6 frame, and severe overheating. I had aluminium fins out the front. That cooled it down, but still a very short flight life, and in one case I blew a battery. I think they overheated the battery looking back. I didn't realise at the time. These motors have been fine on this frame, and I think the reason why is if you look underneath, there's holes just like this is the DJI F330 frame, and just like its bigger brother, the F450, you've got these holes to allow air to be sucked through. Because these motors in particular rely on having adequate airflow because they sit flush on the frame. In fact, I'm going to redo these to get more air into them, even though they're doing alright. So for the motors that are currently on the red Bugs 3 frame, I'm going to move them over onto this other F330 frame that I bought. And the way I've got these mounted is something new for me. If you look at it here, you can see there's a bit of a gap underneath the motors. I've got individual nuts to give even more space. So looking at it from underneath, you get some idea. There's a couple of holes, as was the case with the 450. But what I've done, there's the bolt from underneath, and on the top, it's long enough that I can put a nut on it and then have the motors on top of the nut. So that's got to give really good airflow compared to anything else I've done. So that's the state of the art with motor mounting. As I say, get it wrong, you can damage your batteries, overheat the motor, and of course have a very short flight time. So I now have two quadcopters based on the DJI F330 frame, and the only Bugs components they've got is the covers, the black and red respectively, and the flight control boards. But the motors and the ESCs are all otherwise. So they've both got 2300 kV motors, different designs, and they've both got nuts underneath to maximise the airflow. So I've had a quick flight with both of them, and next step is going to be to take the red motored Bugs with a red top out for a more extended flight, because that's the one I had trouble with, short flight times and overheating. So I'm fairly confident with the nuts underneath I'll get a better result. But there's no substitute for field testing. So here we are, out ready to go. They're 7-inch props. So something you'll notice if you've seen me flying this field before is just how here in South Australia the way the grass dries out, you think it's dying off. It looks horrible compared with a month or so earlier, but in fact it's just what it does. It's the native grasses, and they spring back as soon as they get a bit of rain the next year. But that's why it's a great testing ground, but it's not very pretty anymore. I might insert a quick clip of what it used to look like a month ago. As you can see, the quad's flying nice and steadily. I'm pleased with that. I've got a GoPro underneath as usual, and I've got a deeper cover to get the camera down further, so I can still get a bit of prop, and I'm seeing the engines occasionally. But overall, it's not bad. I might fly it with this way in future. So I'll leave you with it, and stop when you've had enough. So until next time, bye.